Welcome to Planet of the Associations. I'm Seth Kahn.
And I'm Mark Levy.
And we're glad you're here. What is this all about, Mark?
Well, what this is about, and by the way, the reason why I hesitated before I said what this was about, because I realized I said my name with a different inflection then. And so I'm trying desperately to keep things fresh by saying my name with different inflections. I'm Mark Levy. So anyway, so what this is, Planet of the Associations, is a vlog and podcast, and it is for associations, C-level people, CEOs and other C-level people. And it's about the association of the future, and not the distant future, not 100 years from now. It is the near future, X+3. Whenever you're listening to this, it's about the association 3 years from now. What is that association's going to, what is it going to be about? Who's it going to be serving? What kind of tactics, strategies? What's all the stuff it's going to be using? And how do you go about getting there today, making your association the kind of association that can last and thrive into the future, X+3. I'm Mark Levy.
Yeah. And I'm Seth Kahn.
Right.
And here we are again. Yeah. And I just want to say, when I think of associations and I think of the magic of associations, I think of magnetism. I think of a home for a profession or a trade. I think of people having that experience where they say, this is where I belong. This is the group I want to be part of, even if they're not in that profession or trade. Just like I'm a member of the American Geophysical Union, the Earth and Space Scientists, but I'm not an Earth or space scientist, but I love Earth and space science. And so I want to be a member, and I am, because of that magnetic pull. Geophysics, right? The Earth, the magnetic pull. Well, what is that magic, and how do we can it? When I think of how organizations evolve over time, I always go back to, there's some old tired story about an organization that was in the cardboard business, and cardboard was going down in sales. And then they discovered they were in the container business, and they started, doing shrink wrap and stuff like that. So they were able to kind of hold on to their essence. So I'm asking myself, what is the essence of associations? What is it really about when you boil everything away? What's the last thing in the bottom of the pan? And I think about that magnetism. It's magic. And Mark, magic is something you know a lot about. Let's take a little walk into the world of magic.
Well, before we walk into the world of magic, so I appreciate that. When you were talking about being a member of that geophysical club, and you've told me about this before, I really got the idea of you're a fan of that kind of idea, or that kind of business, or that kind of science, or what you want to call it. And it really hit home with the fact of we all, because of Facebook and link, this idea that we all have fans. But it really viscerally hit me there. It's like, yeah, we need in our businesses to think, imagine we had a fan club of our business. Like like the Mouseketeers.
Right.
You'd actually have like a real fan club. Like they really wanted to sign up because they were fans of yours and what they were doing. Like, what would you be doing, and what would you be giving out, and what would you be, how would you make a fan club about what it is that you're doing? Right. And so that hit home.
I remember this is going to just go way over the heads of many of our listeners, I'm sure. But I remember watching the Mouseketeers on TV when I was growing up in black and white. I had a crush on Annette Funicello. And we got mouse ears. We got little hats that had mouse ears on them, right? And a certificate that said you belong to the Mouseketeers. You could send away for these things. And then you could wear them. And when you're like 6 years old while you're watching the show. And I remember watching that, and being all involved in it. And it was exciting to feel like you were part of something.
Right. Yeah. The fan club, it's kind of like, I have a crush on this idea or this thing, and there are other people who have this kind of crush on it too. So It's kind of like, if you're an association, what kind of fan club would you create? And what are people having a crush on? Like, what's the part of it? It's kind of interesting
Here's a quick story. When I was sitting in a board meeting, I was on the AGU board for 2 consecutive terms for 4 years. And I was overjoyed because I got to spend time with all these amazing Earth and space scientists. The woman who was running the Mars landing, this was years ago, not the current Mars landing, but she was actually leading a committee I was on. And we would be talking on the phone, having a conference call. And you could hear her say, wait a minute. And then you hear this like, okay, she's coming, and it was like she was actually communicating with the folks who were involved with the Mars landing. It was so exciting. But this one time, I was sitting around the table at the board meeting, and the chair puts this cartoon up about change. And in the cartoon, there were these people on camels in the Middle East in like the year 0, right? So like 2,000 years ago. And the woman next to me says, they weren't riding camels in the Middle East in the year 0. And we're kind of whispering to each other because the chair's talking. We're not supposed to be talking to each other. I say like, how do you know?
At least you're not supposed to be talking about camels.
That's right.
Minimally.
So I'm like, that's a pretty arcane piece of trivia. People didn't ride camels how do you know that? And she's like, keyboards, she's tapping. Next thing I know, an email pops up on my screen, and there's a paper she co-authored. She was in the Middle East doing analysis of the magnetism of the land. And they found camel bones, and they examined these camel bones, and they were all gnawed on. People were eating camels back then, but they weren't riding them. And she had this, scientific paper that talks about that. And so she was like, that's almost a primary source. You have to live 2,000 years ago to be a primary source, but that was as close as you could get, right? And I was so amazed and impressed with that. I thought that was so cool. That's like the kind of thing that would only be cool to an Earth and space science geek kind of a guy, right? So that's kind of, it's like you're with people like that. Like you can enjoy that kind of stuff with each other.
But why can't you ride camels and eat camels? And by the way, simultaneously, I don't understand.
I'm pretty sure you can't do it simultaneously, but I'm not sure why you couldn't do it asynchronously.
Right.
I think the camel would pitch you off if you like literally started eating it.
But this idea of having fans, having a fan club, I think that, people often call themselves nerds of something. Oh, I'm a so-and-so nerd. I'm a mathematics nerd or mathematics geek. And I think it's kind of, people are embarrassed sometimes to show just how obsessed or in love they are with an idea or with a practice or a thing. So they use a word like nerd or that to kind of laugh it off. But right. It's really like just this insane deep love of it.
Yeah.
And again, so I was reminded when you were talking about the geophysical. So you had asked me about magic, about the background. So as many people perhaps, or some people listening know, that I have a background in magic. As a matter of fact, I've written and co-written magic books. I've worked on magic magazines. I've created a bunch of different magic shows, one that's played Carnegie Hall. And I have the show Chamber Magic. Right behind me is the poster. Chamber Magic, a demonstration of modern conjuring, which is the #1 highest rated show in New York City on TripAdvisor of live New York City shows, rated higher than even Hamilton. So that's a show where I co-created the brand and also the illusions in it. So I know a lot. So ask me your questions about magic and then why they would pertain to associations. Let's hear.
Well, first off, I just have to ask you, do you believe in real magic?
Define real magic.
Like someone really makes something disappear, or or you can move objects with your mind, that are across the room and bend spoons, like
telekinesis and things like that.
Yeah. The reality of it. Like, I know you can make it look like you're doing
the illusion of it.
Right? Really do it.
Right. So one or two things you just described, I think can actually happen from science. Like forms of invisibility or forms of but from a metaphysical standpoint, I have no belief in. So for instance, when I say a mentalist or so, what I mean is someone pretending to be able to read your mind. I'm not casting aspersions at anyone who does anything like this. I'm cool with it all, but I myself have no belief I have no metaphysical beliefs, at least as of right now.
As in,
I think after this conversation, I will, though. I think I'll go, God, help me.
And then if she does, then
right.
We'll know.
Exactly.
So tell me a little bit about mentalism. I mean, what is mentalism? If they're not reading your mind, I've had that experience where you go to a magic show and the person starts telling you something that really is like such a bullseye that you kind of think to yourself, like, how did they do that? It's like
yeah, well, we're all more alike than we are different. And so people have some understanding about how we're all more alike than we are different. And they start saying what those similarities are. And, they're talking to you about them and you make them fit your situation.
But I mean, nobody's saying to me like, I can tell you have one head, I mean,
Right. Well, see, I'm being very evasive about answering your question right now, only because there are professional magicians, mentalists who do stuff like this. And I really don't want to give away what their miracles are. So I'm kind of have a foot half in and half out with what we're talking about, where I don't want to screw over the art form.
Yeah. I understand that. But at the same time, and I'm not asking you to reveal any tricks. At the same time, though, I do like to pull the curtain aside in Mark Levy's mind and say, here's this guy who's got this deep vein of knowledge and experience in the space. What does it look like when he looks at it,
Oh, yeah. Well, I've been doing magic since I was 4 years old, so it's hard for me to step away and see. But I will say a few things that really guide my understanding of magic and actually how it pertains to business and associations or so. So I say to my clients, I'll say, look, I'm a magician, and understand that magic is a demonstration. So if you can't demonstrate that you're a magician or a mentalist or that you can do a miracle, what's the point? Like if I say, oh, I'm this great magician, people say, oh yeah, show me something.
Right.
As well they should. So what I tell to clients is whatever it is you do, you kind of need to demonstrate in the moment that you can perform a miracle with what it is you do. Like you've got to have a demonstration. You can't just say you're great. You actually have to demonstrate you're great, no matter where you are. The same way a magician, like they may find themselves on stage, with people sitting in the audience in tuxedos, or they might be out on the street surrounded by people, 360 degrees surround them. And they've got to be able to perform a miracle in either of those situations. So it's the exact same thing with you and your association. What miracles do you perform, or do your constituents perform? Does your membership perform? And how can you go about giving people a visceral understanding or feeling or demonstration of that in and of the moment, right then and there? An example of this, and I'm not sure if we talked about this in a previous episode, but if we did, fast forward through. So a friend of ours, a client of mine, and a friend of yours, Robbie Baxter. Oh, yeah. So Robbie is the preeminent subscription expert in the world, right? She teaches businesses how to create subscription models around whatever their business is. Doesn't matter, for-profit, nonprofit, whatever. She's a genius at this. So I had asked Robbie, I was coaching her on writing one of her books. And I said to her, what parlor tricks do you know? And like, what do you mean, what parlor tricks? So if you were at a party and you wanted to demonstrate to people that you really understood subscription models in a profound way, how would you demonstrate it? Is there an idea or a story or an exercise? And she said, oh, that's easy. No matter what business you have, I can show you how to make it into a subscription business like that. like instantly. Like just, it doesn't matter. It can be a bicycle business. It can be hard goods, soft goods, intellectual property, like doesn't matter. I'll just tell you, I'll start reeling off answers like that. And I said, okay, great. So that kind of aesthetic should be prevalent in the book you're writing. Like if that's your magic trick, if that's your parlor trick, if that's your Houdini trick, if that's the thing that gives people a visceral understanding that you know what you're talking about, you need to make sure that gets it into the book. And she did do that. She started to put in these case studies, like about all kinds of odd businesses and their subscription. It was to demonstrate it. So anyone listening to this, I challenge you, and ask me follow-up questions on this, Seth, but I challenge you, and ask you, what are the miracles you and your constituents perform? And how can you prove that to me? It's like, great, I believe you. Go ahead and show me.
Yeah. I just want to say before.
Well, and let me say before you say, it's this idea, what I just said, show me.
Right.
Show me. Great. You're this amazing, you're going to help save the world. You're going to help create all kinds of policy that show me.
And visceral was a key word in there. So we'll come back to that. Before we leave Robbie, though, Robbie, she her first book was The Membership Economy, which is a fantastic book. I brought her to DC. We did a workshop with 25 association CEOs. She got work with association CEOs as a result because her work was so on point. And she just recently came out with The Forever Transaction, another great follow-up book. So just want to put in a quick plug for Robbie. So back to the show me, reminds me of Missouri. If I were the, National Society of Professional Engineers, right? And somebody said, what do you do? I'm talking to an engineer. Let's say I'm the membership director, or I'm the education vice president, or I'm the CEO, and I'm at a conference, and this engineer comes walking through the lobby, and I say, we're the NSPE. And then that person says, what do you do? Then there's my show me moment, right? And whatever I show them has got to be something that lights up an engineer. Talk to me about that.
Well, so the first thing you need to do is to explain who you are in a clear, interesting way that gets them excited. And then I'd say the show me moment comes after that.
Okay. So I have my elevator speech. We are the National Society of Professional Engineers. We're the ones who bring all of the engineers together. We provide cutting edge education to engineers. We provide a platform so that they can work together and advocate for policies. And there's a lot of policies that are up right now that are important to engineers at a state, local, and federal level. This is who we are. This is what we do. And that go ahead.
Well, I'd have to better understand what the miracles are that they perform. But let's say I'm someone who wants to join the membership. If I were you, I might say, oh, what kind of an engineer are you? What is it that you're looking to do? What's your biggest problem that you're facing right now? And I'm going to tell you how to solve it right now. That would be an
magic
example.
trick.
And by the way, that sounds a little obnoxious and a little, forward or whatnot. I do that all the time. I mean, you know this, you've known me for years.
Right.
I do that all the time. It's people ask me about the work I'll do, and I'll say, tell me about your work and what's the biggest problem that you're having with it? Okay, great. Here's how here's what you should consider in solving it. And I'll give them a bunch of real ideas right then and there, because for all I know, I'm never going to meet them again. And I want them to thrive in life. So the ideas don't do me any good if they just sit in my head. So I just give them away right then and there. Right. It's what?
Oh my God. It's the call. It's the call. You got to take the call. It's just an unrehearsed show, folks. This is live. This is
Hi, I'm on my live video show as we're going here. So it really has to do with what miracle you can create. That's what I would base it on. But for me, a very one way, the same way a magician, it's like, oh, you're a magician, show me something. So now I'd read your mind, or I'd make a card you sign from the deck, appear somewhere, vanish from the deck and appear somewhere, stuck on the wall, or, all these different kinds of things. That's the way a magician would do it. But the way you would do it, maybe you would draw a schematic to get them to better understand a methodology or an idea, or you try to solve a problem right then and there. And again, a common way for me to deal with this kind of thing is to try to help people as if we were already working together. In other words, the engagement already began.
Right.
That's a common way, because that way they get to sample the wares and there's no distance between your sales process and your marketing process and your consulting process. And this idea, the language for this, a wonderful coach named Steve Chandler, I get this from Steve. It's the idea of when you're working with someone, right? This is before they've hired you or before they've joined your membership or so. And it's you help them there in the moment. And it doesn't become at the end of it, do you want to hire me? It's, do you want to continue the work that we've started with? Right? Because they've already seen what the work is. So it's not like, oh yeah, hire me, let me demonstrate to, it's like, let me sell to you. It's like, no, you just experienced. So if I was an association person, it might be talking to them in a real way about actual ways of solving their problem or creating relationships or connections for them right then and there in the moment. And then it becomes, okay, so that's the kind of thing that happens in our association. If you think this is worthwhile, let's continue on. How would you? It's that kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And, one of the things it reminds me of, in a previous episode, we were talking about how in Hollywood, you have to carry your script with you. Right? Because you never know when you're going to run into a producer and, or have an opportunity where somebody says, show me your work. What do you do? Oh, I write, scripts. Well, do you have something? Yeah, right here. I do. Here's it, and it's your golden moment. Maybe you met the guy standing in line for a cup of coffee at McDonald's, and it's like, this is it. You got 5 minutes and then you're never going to see this guy again unless you can produce something that makes him go, oh, this is cool. This is interesting. Let's follow up. And I was thinking about the wow that comes when you see a magic trick, right? I mean, I think that's one of the things that we've all fallen in love with around magic is that moment where you don't know how it's done and you're like, what? Right? Well, if you could create that level of kind of, it's almost an ecstatic embrace of what you're experiencing with a potential member. Imagine that you had every single member of your staff as an association practice the quote magic trick that was creating the wow moment for a potential member that you run into in an impromptu environment, right? So you're the vice president, you're the CFO. I'm gonna pull someone away from membership, the guy in the back office, right, who does all the spreadsheets. You're the CFO, and you're at the annual conference, and you're walking the halls, and someone pulls your arm and says, "Wow, it's freaking amazing. There's all these cardiologists walking around. I'm a cardiologist. Who are these people? Why are there so many of them together?" And you have an opportunity to do the magic trick. You have an opportunity to create the wow experience. And you have a way to open the door, let them into that world the way you just described, so that they're getting the value or some of the value that they would get from joining the organization. And then their decision is not, should I join this organization, but do I want to keep this value stream flowing? Like, this was really cool.
Which had already started. And the point I want to make is this magic trick, this demonstration that you need to be able to do, it can just be a piece of the experience. I mean, other times that I've dealt with people and I wanted to give them a demonstration of what it was like. I remember someone saying to me, I'm very bad at case studies. Like, I need to create a case study, I just don't know how to do it. I'm kind of blocked when it comes to case studies. And so this was not a client of mine. This is just someone I met. And I said to them, okay, tell me, what's the name of a client who you dealt with, a client who you had a success with? And I said, I won't reveal it, but just tell me their name. And so they told me name. I said, great. What was the problem they came to you with before they even knew you? Like, tell me what they were experiencing and what kind of pain was it causing for them. Okay, great. So you came in, and what did you see that no one else was seeing? And they said, oh, well, blah, blah, blah. Like, right. They weren't, blah, blah. Okay, great. What solution did you have them manufacture based on what you saw? Well, they did X, Y, and Z. Great. What was the result? And they said, oh, blah, 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 blah. And I said, okay, great. So here's your case study. There's a company X. They were experiencing this problem, this kind of problem. As a matter of fact, it was even worse than they could have ever imagined because blah, blah, blah. So I came in, they hired me. I did X and Y. And what I saw from doing X and Y and getting a feel for the land was this. I saw this, which no one there was seeing. They were, they had this problem or this thing was standing in the way. Because of that insight, we then decided to do this solution. And from that solution, they created these products and services and got this benefit. Boom. It was like 3 minutes. And the person, their jaw dropped. I mean, they were like, because they were just blocked on how to do this. I said, no, it's very easy. It's very easy. But like that would be an example, right? You don't have to give them the whole enchilada. You just have to give them this incredible taste of what it's like to actually work with you.
That reminds me of a springboard story. When I was at the World Bank, we studied storytelling, and we actually did a series of think tanks. We brought in Disney and Hewlett Packard, Eastman Chemical, the International Storytelling Center, and several other big organizations. And we asked the question, what's the value of storytelling in a modern organization? And we actually identified 8 different areas or 8 different value propositions for stories. And one of them was the springboard. The springboard is a story that sparks action. It gets people to do something, to take action consistent with whatever it is you want them to do. And the cool thing about a springboard story is that it's bare bones. When you think about expert storytelling, a lot of times you'll think about, like really detailed descriptions, like, the healthcare worker was walking across the sand and she could feel the grit of the individual granules gathering under the bottom of her foot as she took each step. And all of that would just be completely left out of a springboard. It has the minimum amount of information possible to convey what you're talking about. So a typical springboard story from beginning to end is less than a minute long. And it's got these different elements that are required in order to spark action. And the first is the most challenging. The first is you have to know, what action are you trying to spark? What do you want them to do? So like, for example, when we were doing knowledge management at the World Bank, what we wanted people to do was to take their know-how and make it available to their clients when they needed it. That's what we wanted them to do. Second thing you need to do is you need to find a protagonist or main character, if you're not familiar with storytelling jargon, who the audience can instantly relate to. So if you're talking to a bunch of plumbers, you don't want to talk about a healthcare worker in Zambia, right? At the World Bank, a healthcare worker in Zambia is the perfect person to talk about. Right. Everybody knows right away that Zambia is one of the poorest countries on the planet. You don't have to think about it if you're at the World Bank. You know that. And there's a lot of healthcare workers out there. And that connectivity, especially at the time we were telling the story in 1996, was non-existent practically. And so the next thing is that your story needs to be validated without you being present, like your case study, right? If you tell a good case study, the person should be able to go to the person who the story is about and validate that what you said was true. So they should be able to somehow find out about at the World Bank about this healthcare worker. What's the story? What did it really happen? So you have to give them enough information they can do that. That means they might need a date, they might need a location, they might need the name of an individual. And another interesting aspect of a springboard story is it has to have a happy ending. So if you say to somebody, let me tell you about an organization that tried this, and when it was over, everybody lost their jobs and they had to declare bankruptcy and they lost their retirement pensions. So don't do that. That's a horrible springboard story, because what happens when you have a story that has a horrible ending is that people go into flight or fight and they forget what you're talking about. Nobody wants to be bankrupt, right? So they stop listening to the story and they start going, I don't like this. I got to get out of here. So it has to have a happy ending. So you got a protagonist that you can relate to. It can be validated when it's not in your presence. It has a happy ending and it's consistent with the change that you're trying to purvey. That's how a springboard story works. And it's essentially a case study in minimal fashion, right? So when we were at the World Bank, the story that we would tell is that, and remember, this is 1996. There was a healthcare worker in Zambia who wanted the cure for malaria. They went to the website of the Centers for Disease Control and they found it. Imagine if our knowledge was available like that. That's the whole story.
Right.
And now we're talking to people inside the World Bank, and we're trying to convince them to somehow get their knowledge in the hands of their beneficiaries in a way they can put to use when they need it. Right. And that story did the trick. We saw it happen. And the way you see it happen is that the first symptom is people come up to you and they're excited about the insight they've had. They don't come up to you and say, that was a great story you just told. They don't come up to you and say, I want to be a healthcare worker in Zambia. They come up to you and say, wow, I'm in health and nutrition, but we're in Mongolia, and I just had 3 ideas about how we could get some information out to our beneficiaries. That's the first sign it's working. The second sign that it's working is when people start telling you the story because they don't know it originated with you.
Right.
And let me tell you about the Zambia healthcare worker I just found out about. And both of those things happened with our story. Our story was incredibly successful. It sparked knowledge management, which ended up being a $60 million a year initiative in just a couple of years. So anyways.
So you're talking about insight. Our next episode, I want us to let's talk about the springboard story again, but then I want to talk about insight because it's one of the most important things that we could talk about in order to get people aligned inside an association. So I'm Mark Levy.
And I'm Seth Thun.
And we'll see you next time.
Next time.